Okay, let's start.
Just can I sit there?
Okay, my name is Alistair McKeating. I'm the chairperson of the Northumberland Sleeping Cabin Collective, a member of Think Tiny Homes Northumberland, and the Cultivate Festival Board of Directors. On my immediate right, Shane Watson, board member of NSCC as well, also a board member of Greenwood Coalition and a board member of Think Tiny Homes Northumberland, and then a member of or a board member of the Assisted Housing Commission, EHC.
Yeah, a member. Yeah.
Member, okay. Missy McLean, board member of Greenwood Coalition, Mom Stop the Harm, a member of Tweak Easy Coburg, a social worker with the Legal Center, or a social worker and a member of the Legal Center?
Social worker
at the Legal Center, and mother of 2 children. Skip a chance. This will take a moment. I gotta read Jamie's handwriting here. So Chance Brown is a member of Tweak Easy Coburg, a volunteer with PARM, who works closely with the harm reduction team, and recently a member of the Community Connectors Group, a group I highly recommend for people who want to work to help the homeless. Community Connectors is a Facebook group. I highly recommend joining and participating there. After 5 years of living in Coburg, he calls it Home Plus, in quotes. I'm not entirely sure why the quotes are there, but where he currently resides in the encampment since day one, helping out as much as he can while working on his goals. And finally, Jeff Wilden, a counselor in the community of Brighton, a real estate agent, also a board member of Think Tiny Homes Northumberland, and a former board chair of Transition House. So if I can just start with a bit of clarity on especially the second video and some of that terminology. The second video talked almost exclusively about tiny homes. Most of us on this panel, as well as some of the other people, distinguish between what we call sleeping cabins, which is what the Better Kent City is, those 8 by 10 self-contained homes for individual people, and then tiny homes is a broader categorization. Maybe I'll ask Jeff to explain the meaning of a tiny home as distinct from the sleeping cabins.
Thank you. Just from a municipal planning perspective, as well as from a real estate perspective, a tiny home can be really any home that is under a certain square footage. The building code specifies what the minimum square footage for any home is, and typically a tiny home is one that's about 500 square feet or smaller, but different builders will say that even something that's 800 square feet could be a tiny home. It can be a really loose term, but a sleeping cabin is specifically, it's a place that is designed to keep somebody warm and give them some secure space. Typically it does not have a kitchen or a bathroom. It is literally just sort of a bedroom, self-contained in that way. Typically sleeping cabins can be mobile or easily moved, whereas for zoning purposes and things like that, a tiny home is supposed to be a permanent structure. So it's a technical difference, but when you're trying to find a place to set up a bunch of homes, technical differences matter a whole lot to city planners.
So let's start. We had a number of questions, and then we received a number more, so we won't have time to go over all of them. But let's start with one that I think is a good introduction to what we're talking about. And I was really struck watching Emerson talk about his surprise, I guess, at coming together of that photo collective, realizing how much he had in common, but also how different he was from other homeless people, other unhoused people. So question to I guess primarily Chance, but anybody else is welcome to contribute. What does life for someone who is experiencing homelessness look like each day, and what have you learned about yourself and about other homeless people over the course of the last year? So I'll ask Chance to respond to that, and I don't know if other people want to.
That's a rough question, really. It's really hard to answer. Up until like the encampment, which like by chance last week I started calling it home, and caught myself saying that, realizing using the terminology home means you feel comfortable about your well-being, your safety, your belongings, even like, I feel comfortable where I go in public to use the bathroom out on the beach. And things like how I make my meals, or how I stay warm, or how I get my clothing cleaned. All those things are being kept and done, and I caught myself calling the place home. And then summarizing it all together, I realized those are the essential things that you need. Come the wintertime, you know there's going to be a little bit more that's needed, insulation and such, but I don't want this to be permanent. None of us want it to be permanent, and all of us have these different needs and wants and levels of how fast we're going to be able to get that done. Because certain things in the life you might not want to change. Like I know I want to keep my cell phone and have my cell phone bill paid, so I make sure that's paid for. I can, talk to my friends, my family, and then do the community connectors outreach to it. At the same time, I like certain meals. Comfort food is essential, so some of my money is spent on that. Something that might not be donated is my comfort food, so I get my comfort food out of my own money. While I'm still working on other goals at hand, but for the most part, everyone is uniquely different and has their own pace. And you gotta understand that, it's not just simple math. Hey, why don't you just go get a job, or you can go do here. It's not like that. Sometimes there's things that need to be addressed beforehand. Yeah.
Here's a question I'm not fully sure I understand, so whoever wrote it may want to clarify. But as a friend of a local tiny homeowner, as a friend of a local tiny home owner, I understand that the planning department and bylaw departments are currently making changes to welcome this living option. Is everyone here in agreement on the board with the future progress? So I'm not sure if everyone here meant the panel, or if it meant this audience, or if it meant specifically some of the politicians who are here. Direct the question first to the board about how you feel this community is making progress, and then if other people, if the author of this question wants to clarify, maybe we can get some more or some additional depth in the answer. So.
I vote yes. I think that one of the things that we need to work on, and I have been encouraged by some of the things that I've seen happening in this community to work towards this, is more options for housing and more diversity. As Chance was saying, it's difficult to take one person's experience and apply that broadly. Whether you're housed or unhoused, sort of what every day looks like is a little bit different, and everybody's needs and desires around housing are a little bit different. So I think the more options we've got, and in particular, options that provide, very affordable, deeply affordable options for people in our community are what we need, so that people who are here can stay, and that we can welcome everybody.
Yeah, the diversity is really important, not only because different people have different needs, but also because there's different opportunities depending on the property. I saw a property for sale in Camelford maybe 6 months ago that's about 30 feet wide. You can't possibly build a home on a spot that's 30 feet wide. What are you going to do with this land? Somebody's trying to sell it. Well, if we had that land, we could probably put half a dozen tiny homes on it, and that would be 6 more units for people who need them. There are unopened road allowances all over the place, things like that. The Better Tent City that they mentioned in the video is entirely on a road allowance. So tiny homes allow for that kind of operation where you can fit a bunch on a small stretch of land, but it's also more affordable infill housing where people might be able to put it in a laneway, in their driveway, in their backyard. And so it just provides more opportunities for more housing. Typically when we talk about affordable housing, we're thinking large subsidized apartment buildings. Those projects take years to get going. But the more diversity we have, the more options we have. I've even spoken with local politicians about the possibility of 3D printed housing. We've got Buddy Bus in the house. These are all ways of getting more housing available to more people. Tiny homes is one piece of that puzzle. And because there are a lot of different types of tiny homes, it could be a lot of different pieces of the puzzle.
direct this question to Jordan, but I'll direct it to the panel. What are the main barriers for folks who are trying to obtain affordable housing besides the obvious money issue? What are other barriers that that hold people back from finding appropriate housing?
I can start. Based on my experience and what I've seen in my work with folks, there are so many barriers. Poverty, the increase in housing costs and the way that the wages that people earn have not kept pace with the same increases. Precarious work, the financialization of housing as a commodity that is used for investors to make money instead of being treated as the human right that it is, and a basic human need that needs to be valued and appreciated and centered. Practically, what I see with folks, in particular those who have been experiencing homelessness for a while, or those who have a disability and perhaps receive social assistance, is an incredible amount of stigma and discrimination on the behalf of landlords. We see postings that say specifically that they will not accept anyone who receives social assistance. We see, the need for credit scores, the need for references, saying, working people only. You can't get your foot in the door if you've faced any sort of marginalization or been unhoused and are seeking shelter. If you are looking to get into subsidized housing, they talked about the number of people in the Kitchener-Waterloo region. I believe that we have a wait list of approximately 1,500 households who are waiting for RGI housing. Those who are waiting for a single person unit will be waiting upwards of 10 years. So it's about capacity, it's about housing stock, it's about wages, it's about capitalism, a lack of development of public housing, and a focus on people building wealth while others don't even have a roof over their head.
Thank you. Fantastic. Start. I want to zero in. Sorry. Thank you for speaking up. You mentioned capitalism. I want to talk a little bit about ideology. For the last 30 to 40 years, the dominant ideology in North America has been market-oriented. I can tell you as a real estate agent, the market will not make housing more affordable. That's not how it works. The market will not provide a diversity of housing solutions. The reality is that it is easier for a developer or builder to build more single-family detached dwellings that take up a lot of space and require a lot of roads and pipes and other services. It is easier, simpler, cheaper, faster for them to build those than it is for them to build a diversity of housing models, than it is for them to invest in the process of creating cooperatives, or even just purpose-built rentals at scale. Those things are not profitable or simple in the housing industry. In terms of builders being people who just want jobs so that they can live their lives, they're not going to go too far out of their way to make a paycheck when they have so much demand for that single thing that they're very good at making. So nothing against builders or developers, insofar as the system is set up to facilitate that. Now, in terms of how systems are set up, this system was designed over the last 40 years with that kind of market thinking in mind. The government in the 1970s, the federal government built about a third of the houses that were built. By the mid-90s, they were building almost none. And it's been that way ever since. So we've come a long way away from government funding for housing. Now, when we talk about government, we tend to think about government as if it's one big thing. And we tend to think about federal government. But the reality is that social services is covered by the provincial government, but it is administered by the upper tier municipal government, the county. but it takes place in the lower tier municipal government territory of the town. And so we're dealing with 4 different levels of government that all have some degree of stake in this, that all have overlapping programs and funding requirements and delivery models. And it is an incredibly complex puzzle. And then there's the community lane and the associational lane. You know, if you've been around Greenwood for a while, you've probably heard about these different lanes. But the government or institutional lane itself is actually 4 or more lanes that are all sort of crisscrossing each other all the time. So one of the things that I'm trying to do on council is work with councillors from across Northumberland. So far, Brighton, Port Hope, Coburg, and Alma-Caldwin have all passed a resolution saying that we're going to create an intermunicipal ad hoc or working group that is focused on housing and homelessness and saying what is in our lane as lower tier municipal governments, what can we do that isn't dependent on funding from the feds or the province, that isn't going to get in the way of the county's housing first or harm reduction philosophy. What can we do to foster and support community engagement? What can we do to sort out all of these lanes so that we can be part of the solution? And those, all of the ways that we get in each other's way are, I think, the systemic institutional barriers to housing.
Thank you. This question may sound similar to what I just asked, but there's a subtlety to it that I'd like people to comment on. Why are some folks who are experiencing homelessness able to access space at a shelter and some do not choose to or cannot? So I guess I'm focusing specifically on the shelter aspect, and I guess specifically on Transition House as the only county-wide shelter.
Okay, this question was asked at the one on Tuesday. I forget what Neil said for the most part is, but I'll tell you, I'm one of those people that's refusing to go to Transition House right now, not because their services are bad or anything like that. They're actually great. I mean, sleeping there from 1 till 6 is not asking for a whole lot. Not using drugs inside the service is great. They have a spot where I can safely put my drugs and store them if I do use. And they do offer referrals out to all the services that are available in the town. And the staff, honestly, some of those people have helped me change my life and get back up off of my feet numerous times. So right now, the reason why I'm not going there is that leaves the bed open for other people, but there's other people that are banned from Transition House. That might get evaluated at the beginning of the year or permanently banned indefinitely. They need a little bit more hands-on, and those people are staying in the encampment. And some of them, it's the first time kind of being out in the tent and slowly coming to winter, and they need that extra hand. They need that little push or help cleaning, maintaining their area. And while I wait for myself to get a rehab program, I'm self-sustainable. I know how to do those things. And help out and give a little bit of time until my time comes to go. So while I can do that now, when I come back from rehab, I'll probably be in Transition House because I'm going to need a little bit more of a kind of a inside place and a little bit more isolation from some of the peers that I hang out with.
I can add on to it, just again sharing what people have shared with me about why they do or don't access shelter there, or why they can or can't access shelter at Transition House. The simple fact is that it doesn't work for everybody. I don't know if anyone in this room, besides maybe the 2 of us, have been inside Transition House before. Okay, cool. It's congregate living for adults, right? So it's bunk beds for adults. There are rules, and sometimes those rules don't work for people for a variety of reasons. Some people don't feel safe staying in a room with 5 or upwards of 11 other people. This is still a small community, and so the homeless community, many of the folks know each other, have had interactions with each other. You could find yourself, you don't get a say in which room you stay in or who you're sleeping next to. You could find yourself sleeping next to someone who's caused you a lot of harm or who you just don't get along with. There are restrictions that people are put on. So a lot of times folks aren't able to stay at the shelter because they're on a ban, they're on a service restriction. Those restrictions can range anywhere from 24 hours to a year. We only have one emergency shelter. If you are unable to access that shelter because you're on a ban for, say, 3 months, where are you going to stay? Other things that they can't accommodate there, it's not an accessible space. There isn't a lot of storage where people have belongings. They don't allow pets. If you're part of a family or couple, they don't provide for rooms where you can shelter together. So couples are making the choice between staying outside together or having to separate and sleep next to strangers. These are just a few of the reasons why people might not access that space or might be unable to access that space.
Okay, another sort of run on from that. There are many agencies and organizations helping the homeless, but what are the homeless doing on their own to improve their life and to be part of the community? For example, getting a job, schooling, etc.
I'm going to take deep breaths.
One of the things we've been talking about a little bit is the right to housing. In the same way that we might talk about somebody's right to access safe drinking water. And so I think one of the things I'd like us to think about as we approach that sort of question is fundamentally, do we believe in that right for people to have a safe place to shelter? A safe place to call home, a community to call home. And that is a starting point. There's this idea, this concept that you may have heard of called housing first. And it's this sort of idea that got me engaged in the issue of affordable housing and people who are experiencing homelessness. I was convinced by a local nurse from the health unit many years ago that having a safe place to sleep, a safe place to call home, is a fundamental first step in becoming a whole person and healing whatever hurts or ailments you need to work on. So I think we need to start there, and then we can have a conversation about what needs to happen to support people getting well, or to support people in achieving the goals that they have.
There are many degrees of homeless. People with no home, people living on the streets, people living in their cars, something that I was stunned to find out the number of people who live in a car. People living in tents, people sharing an apartment, sharing a home with family or with a friend. What are we talking about tonight? And I think tonight, the focus, I think with most of the comments so far have been on what we would say higher acuity, complex needs. I'm wondering if anybody on the panel would like to talk about the sort of hidden homelessness, the couch surfing, the inadequate housing as opposed to no housing.
I couch surf. Once a week, I might jump to a friend's house to get a shower, to charge my batteries, to get a place to sleep when I know it's going to rain, be heavily, protected from the elements so I don't get sick. Because when you're living outside, getting sick is a lot easier. When you're living in a group environment, getting COVID is a lot easier. People don't respect your boundaries because they're worried about themselves and they forget about those small things. Not that they intentionally mean to do it, but accidentally it happens. They need to talk to you because they're having their own emotional outbreak and they forget that you had COVID. And now they have COVID, but now you just got lost for COVID, now you have it again. It can be annoying sometimes, but couch surfing happens a lot. I'd say a lot of people, in my community have that opportunity happen to them at least in a month, where they have a place to sleep for a night or two, but it's nothing permanent. Where it's not housing at all. You have rules there, just like you would have a transition notice, but at the same time, that might be your friend or peers or someone who's just generous to offer space. It's not a safe place to go home, but it's better than sometimes
I'd like to extend that question a little bit, because there's this, the question was about hidden homelessness. But I think I'd also like us to think about and be aware of people who are precariously housed or housed in situations that are, frankly not adequate or not safe. There's this idea of this iceberg. You're familiar with an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg on the housing front is visible homelessness. But underneath of that, there's all kinds of issues that range from people who can't afford where they're living to housing that is not healthy, all sorts of issues. And as Alistair said, our group has been surprised by how many people in our community are living in their cars and how many of those people are senior citizens. And so there is this visible homelessness is a little bit like the canary in the mine. It's just the tip of something that's much bigger. And I've heard many stories of people who are on the brink of losing their housing, and sometimes by the skin of their teeth have found some place to live. We have a staff member at Greenwood Coalition who shared a story on Tuesday about having to leave the community because the place that she was renting, the landlord decided it was going to go up for sale, and there was no way she was going to be able to afford the cost to purchase that home. In order to find a home that she could afford, she had to leave the community. So there's a lot underneath the surface here as well, all of which we need to tackle. Otherwise, we're going to see more and more of this tip coming out of the water.
Thank you. I also want to point out from, two different things. First of all, as I mentioned before, the province does fund social services, but it goes through the county, and Cobourg is the county seat. It's the place where the county government is. It's the place where the only shelter is. It's the place where pretty much all of the social services are congregated. And so, to a certain extent, places like Brighton, which, it's half an hour drive from Cobourg, we have effectively outsourced responsibility for helping people because we have no services there. That said, homelessness does exist in Brighton. It is invisible. It is couch surfing and precarious housing. It is people who are sleeping rough, but they can find a quiet enough spot. It's not on the beach. We don't have a beach. So they can be undetected. Occasionally we'll see somebody trying to shower in the splash pad or something like that, but for the most part, people who are underhoused in Brighton are invisible to most people. But they are there, and we know that they're there. But they don't show up on counts, and so we have this idea that we have a general number of people within Northumberland County who are experiencing homelessness, but that doesn't count a whole lot of people. The first thing that Transition House does if somebody comes there is they try to divert them to more stable situations. And so those more stable situations are often informal living arrangements, bunking at somebody else's house, those types of things. And so, as much as we see a growing visible homelessness issue, as Shane said, it very much is the tip of the iceberg. The other part of it is that in the last 5 years, housing costs have doubled in Northumberland County, sometimes more than doubled. They've come down a little bit since then, but they're still well over double what they were when I bought my house in 2017. And if I had to buy a house today, I couldn't. So even though I am securely housed, in some sense, I'm also precariously housed, because if I lost my house today, my family of 4 we would have nowhere to go. And I think that's actually true of most of us. So, it is entirely by the luck of the market, the timing of when we bought our homes, the economic state of 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or in some cases maybe 30 years ago, or 50 years ago. If we were starting out today, we would not be so lucky.
Sorry, I don't want to that. Didn't this country once, like, when people came to Canada, give land to them? Like, I think that's what happened, and that's changed now. Just noting that.
Okay, I'm going to combine two questions here, and one is just a little more precise than the other. So, are the volunteers at the encampment doing anything to teach the residents their recovery, resiliency, self-sufficiency, life coping skills, etc.? And then specifically, has anyone or is anyone driving campers to Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, drug counseling, or some other type of rehab? And then, not exactly along those lines, but similar, what about employment, or I guess employment skills? Who's helping teach employment skills?
I guess I'll go to answer the Narcotics Anonymous one being anonymous. Can't discuss about it. But when it comes to treatment programs, I'm sure some of the answers I've given you already is options available that I'm doing personally myself. And as an outreach person, I provide and let other people know some of those options, as well as the other service teams that come in there. But I'm just going to leave my part of that.
Can you read the first part again, Alistair?
Are any of the volunteers at the encampment, or are volunteers at the encampment doing anything to teach the residents their recovery, resiliency, self-sufficiency, coping skills, and then in particular, is anyone taking people to NA or AA meetings or some other form of drug counseling or some other type of rehabilitation meetings?
Okay, so I can say, as a volunteer at the encampment, that no, I'm not teaching anybody about resiliency. The people who live in the encampment teach me about resiliency. I wouldn't last one night out there. I've never camped in my life. I have no skills to pass on in survival, in how to be resilient, in how to live as a person pushed to the margins of their own community and treated like less than human. It's truly the residents of the encampment who show those of us who come to spend time there and to be in solidarity with them and to offer whatever assistance we can, which often includes rides to appointments. People are really interested in people's personal schedules of the day. Lots of appointments and lots of, trying to go to apartment viewings for those units where they're not welcome. There's a lot of that. But in terms of the first part, that's what I can offer as someone who's been working with folks who are sleeping around for years now.
Sometimes I think we make assumptions about people who are sleeping rough or unsheltered, and one of the issues that you might have if you are in that situation is that you have to worry about what's going to happen to your stuff when you go to work in the morning. We need to be careful of making the assumption that people who are in an encampment or sleeping in a tent or couch surfing, that they don't have a job, that they're not active members of the community. Because I've met more than one who are in that situation, and it's really heartbreaking for me when I hear stories about people who've come home at the end of the day in the wintertime and their tent's been ransacked. And what do you do then? What would I do then? I don't know.
And also, I guess, in terms of sharing what we've learned, the number of people that we talk to who are retired, who are in their 60s and have lost their jobs, lost their homes, is shocking. They can't just get up and start a new career at 65, 68. Again, part of the lack of awareness that we're trying to counteract, the stigma, the presumptions that all homeless people look like this. So let's turn a little more to solutions. How can we as citizens organize our fellow community members for change? How do we create momentum to shift policy? And I'll presumptuously extend that to more than just policy, but how can we create the momentum to build, figuratively or literally, housing?
I wish there was an easy answer to that. I sometimes have people who contact me and say, I've got land. We could put a whole bunch of tiny homes on it. And I say, thank you, that's very generous of you. But first of all, zoning won't allow it. So we need to do some policy work. And actually, in Think Tiny Homes meetings, I know Alistair and Jenny are often chomping at the bit to be like, okay, so when do we start building? And I say, well, we've got at least 6 months worth of policy work before that's even a question. And it drives them crazy. It drives me crazy. But then there's also the question of the people who offer me land, it's often rural land. And so if it's 30 kilometers out of town, how are you going to get a ride in? So we need to look at, okay, well, how are we using our land downtown? Are there public lands? In Brighton, we've started a land banking initiative, and we're looking at ways that we can buy land. Northumberland County has an affordable housing strategy that all of our member municipalities signed on to in 2019 that says, lower tier governments, find land, give it to the county, and the county will build housing. To date, no such land has been given. Working on it, but sometimes that means waiting until some land comes on the market, and then finding out that there wasn't enough money left in the municipal budget, and then having to go out to the community to try and get the support for a tax levy increase so that we can start buying land that we can then give away to the county so that they can build housing, so that 3 to 5 years from now we will have more affordable units, and that 10-year wait list for rent geared to income units will be cut down to 5. We live in a world of complex systems that we unfortunately need to move one step at a time, and a lot of these systems have been left to rot for 30 years. So the thing that you can do to help get housing built, first of all, if you have housing, or if you have an extra property, even just space in your yard for an extra unit, come talk to us. We'll find a way to put it to use. So that's part of it. If it's walkable, close to services, things like that's perfect. Secondly, be ready to say, yes, I'm willing to do my part. I will vote for more taxes. And it's sad that it comes down to that, but every time an initiative like this comes up, and councillors like me say, hey, residents, are we ready to pay out more for the sake of others? The answer is usually no. Not always, but usually. And I recognize that we are all feeling a pinch. Inflation is high. Everything costs more than it used to. We technically, anyone who already owns a home, doubled in value in the last 5 years, and so you have more access to debt, but you don't actually have any more money. So I get it. But if we each do a little bit more, we can create space within this broken system where we can make some progress. There are no silver bullets, there are no overnight issues, but that political will comes from the bottom up. When political will comes from the top down, it's called tyranny. If we don't like it, we push back against it, and rightfully so. When political will comes from the bottom up, that's called a movement. And if you guys show up, people like me can get a whole lot more done.
Excellent answer, Jeff. I'd just like to add something. I'm adding to questions tonight. So the solutions and things that need to be done from a policy perspective in order to provide more and better and affordable housing options is all great. That's very important work. I also, this metaphor that was used in the Better Tent City video of a lifeboat is really sticking with me though. Because that is, is it in our society, in Canada, is it appropriate to offer a sleeping cabin as a housing option? Not really, but it's better than a tent, and it's achievable, and it's a sort of lifeboat that could benefit many people in our community. In the mix of options from shelters such as Transition House, to warming rooms, to more affordable options, to things like sleeping cabins or other creative ideas. We need to think about that as well, because policy takes time, but that's not helping somebody tonight.
And I'll add that policy comes with restrictions. The warming room last year had restrictions for people that got banned. If you guys read the news, 7 people found shelter and refuge in a place in Coburg that, was kind of abandoned. We helped get together on some of the coldest of nights, because if not, those people might not be here today. And they did what they did to survive. People say that might be breaking and entering, but they were just trying to find a way to live. And I think everyone's entitled to that.
This is almost a natural follow-up to that. And I've got my own answer, but I'm trying to facilitate instead of providing my answers to these questions. Has there been any consideration for the law-abiding, tax-paying citizens who do not want a tent city of any kind and the accompanying behavior in their community? What's the question?
So, if people are more upset about seeing tents than they are about the fact that people don't have homes, then I'm not sure where to start with those folks. In terms of, what was it, the law,
Law-abiding, tax-paying.
yeah, I mean, wow, we're really creating a binary here that with no basis. I don't even know if I want to answer the question, because I don't know if it warrants an answer, but Jeff wants to say something.
Sure. One of the great things about property taxes is that it is not a transaction. It is not the purchase of services. You pay property taxes at the municipal level. They're actually not terribly progressive taxes. A lot of times people can't afford their property taxes. But the thing about paying taxes is that it does not, you're not owed anything for those taxes. It's not a special status. As a municipal councillor, I represent all of the residents of my municipality, whether they live in the $1 million house or whether they have no house at all. They are still a resident. Sometimes when we talk about providing services to people who are experiencing homelessness, the phrase comes out, how do we even know if they're from here? But the thing about being a resident of a municipality is that you are from there because you are there. That's the nature of residency. Anyone who lives in the municipality of Brighton gets to vote in our election. They just have to be able to show that they are from there in the sense that they lived there. They don't need to be Canadian citizens even. They can have citizenship from somewhere else. They might not be able to vote in a federal election because they're not citizens, but they vote municipally. So everyone who lives here is from here. Nobody who pays taxes is owed anything for that. It is not a special status either way. We all belong, and that's what makes a community. And we all contribute what we can to that community, and that's what keeps it going.
Thanks so much for that comment, Jeff. I guess can I just add one thing or a couple of things? So I mean, a couple of things that are coming to mind is, talking about behaviors that go on at the encampment. There's lots of behavior that happens behind closed doors. The difference is some people don't have those doors or those walls to have their arguments, to have their bad days, to have their crises. And so when we're judging folks for having those bursts out on the street, it's the difference between having the ability to go and have privacy to have those moments and not. Okay, so that's what part of trying to, Dr. Gabor Mate talks about, don't ask what's wrong with you, ask what happened to you. Right? And then the last little piece I just want to say is that there's often I hear all this talk about, the taxpayer question, I pay this and they're getting this for free and I'm, social assistance. And I think what I'm often thinking of these days is there's this scarcity mindset, right? Times are tough. Grocery prices are high. And as we all face a struggle in whatever scale that is for our current condition, it does create a scarcity mindset. But what I would all hope that people will think about, maybe tonight or later, is that there are those of us who are down here trying to survive to various degrees. There are a bunch of people up here who are making the profits off those groceries, right? That are making excessive capital off of that. And so rather than turning our attention to those folks and our politicians who have tools at their disposal to try to bring some of that capital down to the rest of us, right? We're stuck down here fighting amongst ourselves, and they're laughing up there, for lack of a better description.
This question is making me think about the question that is asked in Scripture, who is my neighbor? And, everybody who is living here is a citizen in the community. And so, whether however you are housed in this community, you're part of that community. And so, yes, there is consideration. If you're a law-abiding citizen with some influence and power, or if you're a citizen who's had some difficulty with the law for whatever reason and is precariously housed or not housed, you're still part of the community. My experience has been that things are skewed a little bit towards those people who are established in neighborhoods, who've got the time and money to think about and have say about who they want their neighbor to be. And oftentimes it is those sorts of comments about who we do not want to be our neighbor, or who we do not want in our neighborhood, that is showing up in the inbox of our counselors. So if you are one of those people who is ready to engage and understand a little more about who your neighbor is, especially if that neighbor might be the sort of person that doesn't come from the same social circle as you, who you don't quite understand. If you're ready to get to know that person, if you're ready to say yes to something in your backyard, then it's really important to let your counselors know that too, because that heavily influences decisions that are made at council, what people are hearing from the community. And so whatever your opinion is, I would encourage you to voice it. Let your counselors know, let other decision makers know, because I don't think that homelessness defines an individual, but our response as a community to homelessness will define our community.
Right on.
One last question, and I take the liberty of a little bit of editorial comment on this before I get to my question. I am a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen. I do not want a tent city of any kind in Northumberland. Not because I don't like those people, because it hurts me that those people have no other alternative except to live in a tent. I'm struck by two comments in those films. One was from Nadine, the organizer, woman who runs the Better Tent City. She started that illegally. And I think that one of the limitations and what my contributions are, this goes to the title of the second film, How Far Would You Go? How far I go so far has been very much within the law, very much recognizing the frustration of dealing with bylaws and all the things that can get in the way. I have a different kind of respect for people who break the law to save people's lives. And so with that, from the panel, and maybe we can carry this on afterwards, what are simple ways that community members can support or help their unsheltered neighbors? Start with the panel.
I guess I'll start with 2 years ago being homeless. There's a bylaw of you can't have tents set up. No structured four-wall kind of device. I'll say for the most half part of this year and last year, I slept in a hammock. Never no problems with bylaw because it never goes to those rules and restrictions. Something I've kind of passed along to other towns and other places to kind of, find ways of bypassing that for people that are living rough. It's not the greatest answer, but that does allow people to not get harassed and bothered of where they're going to put their belongings from one spot to the next.
Some of the practical things folks can do: treat people like human beings, acknowledge their humanity. There's an incredible amount of dehumanization that's going on right now with folks who are homeless and folks who use criminalized drugs. Remember that laws are constructs. We change them all the time. We make them, we can change them. What's considered to be unlawful or illegal can change tomorrow with the will of the public and those who create policy. If you want to, if you see someone in a tent, leave them alone. If you see someone sleeping in their car, let them shelter in peace. If you want to contribute in some way, Alistair shared about the Community Connectors group. There are a myriad of organizations and different groups that do outreach work or provide different kinds of supports. It's whatever is your gift, your skill, your bundle to carry and to offer. You can find a purpose for it. There's lots of people in this room. I think everyone, by virtue of being here tonight, would be happy to help people find their way to contribute. So stay connected with each other.
Second all of that. One of the things I talked about earlier is the different lanes. There's the institutional lane and the associational lane and the community lane. The associational lane includes things like service clubs and shelters and other things like that that are not government, and those provide opportunities for volunteerism. And I'm sure you've heard about how churches and Rotary clubs and Lions clubs and all these groups are in decline. The amount of good that the community can produce without government support hinges upon how many people are willing to roll up their sleeves. I first started addressing this issue back when I was in Bible college, and I was volunteering twice a week downtown Vancouver. And I was terrified at first, because there we're not dealing with 24 people at a shelter, we're dealing with many hundreds of people everywhere. We were on East Hastings, and my fear lasted about 10 minutes after I met my first person. And I started learning people's stories. And that volunteering changed my entire relationship to the concept of homelessness, to the concept of belonging and lawfulness and all of those types of things. So if you find a way, if you can find a place, any association where you can volunteer your time in a way that will actually involve serving someone, I can't recommend it enough. It can change your life and maybe help someone else's. And then when the political issues come forward, you will have an answer. It won't be a question for you of, oh no, what do we do? Your answer will be, we need to help these people because I know them. I know that they belong, and they are my neighbor.
I don't want an encampment in my community either. I don't want sleeping cabins in this community. But I thought it was, I think it's sort of a necessary lifeboat, as I was saying earlier, as was said in the film, right? I don't think it's a great idea. Our group said it's the best worst idea that there is available to respond to the kind of urgent nature. So what can you do? I would say, whatever way you want to get involved, whatever better idea you have, then, I know there's a bunch of people that will jump on that dream. And maybe our dream is not big enough. Maybe it's not good enough. Maybe sleeping cabins aren't good enough. Maybe an encampment is not good enough. I don't think it is. But what's possible is possible with the community working together. So I think one thing that you can do is if as the rest of the panelists have said, there's a variety of ways that you can get involved. But another way that you can help is sometimes just stepping out of the way and not saying no.
I think the definition of encampment is actually like a series of tents set up for soldiers and nomads. If you look up the definition of nomads, those are people that travel from place to place with livestock. We don't have any livestock. We have pets. That's about it.
Okay. With that, we've gone about 10 minutes over. I'm sure there are many of us who would love to stick around and talk to people who either have questions or are looking for some way to contribute. Blake, did you want to say something?
I know I'm not supposed to talk, but
It's officially over now, so you can talk.
we have talked about trying to find land, but it's not zoned right to put tent cities or small houses on. And I got to tell you, man, it breaks my heart when I walk down King Street East and it's cold and raining or snowing, and I come upon a little tent city outside the gates of Brookside Youth Center. And those people are laying there freezing, hungry, emotionally distraught, and wondering what's going to happen to them the next day. And all the government has to do is take the key and open the gate.
Absolutely right.
And let them sleep in any one of those buildings. It's not an encampment. There were hundreds and thousands probably of students that went through that youth center. I know I spent a bit of time there myself. And there are bedrooms. The rooms can be heated. All the infrastructure is there. But all the government, we need to lobby them and say, hey, there is a place where he can stay, where he's not going to freeze overnight. All we have to do is get them to put the key in the lock and open it.
Thank you, everyone.
I just have a point. This is